Hello guys and welcome as always to Let's Talk About It. Now then, if you take any romantic relationship, they are full of ups and downs. Couples argue, couples make up, couples move on. But there are times when things take a dark turn and, for the subject of this video, women commit gruesome murders of their partners, giving them a collective nickname of black widows. In February 2000, a slaughterhouse worker by the name of Catherine Knight committed the cold-blooded and abhorrent murder of her partner with the use of her prized butcher's knives. Born on October 24, 1955 in Tenterfield, Australia, Knight had a childhood that was filled with abuse that she either witnessed, experienced or participated in. At 15, after failing to learn to read and write, she left school, and a year later she got a job in an abattoir. It was her dream job, and she was so proud of it that she hung her butcher's knives above her bed. Over the course of her life, Knight had a number of toxic relationships. Firstly, with a man named David Kellett, who was a raging alcoholic. Kellett was prone to using his fists, but so was Knight, and very quickly she became the dominant force in their relationship. The pair married in 1974, and on their wedding night, Knight tried to strangle her new husband after he spurned her fourth-round sexual advances. Kellett fought her off, and despite the attempt on his life, the couple stayed together for 10 years and had 2 daughters. David Kellett was an unfaithful husband, and in an attempt to get back at him, Knight once placed their 2-month-old daughter on train tracks. She then threatened anyone who tried to intervene with an axe. Thankfully, no train arrived. She was of course arrested and spent some time on a psychiatric ward, where she told nurses that she planned to kill the mechanic that fixed her husband's car because it had allowed Kellett to drive to his affairs. Despite this, Knight was eventually released. In 1986, after the end of her marriage to David Kellett, Catherine Knight started a relationship with a local miner named David Saunders. As with all of her relationships, this one was full of abuse, jealousy and mistrust, and on one occasion, to show David Saunders just what she was capable of, Knight slit the throat of his puppy in front of him. Even after witnessing such a cruel and violent act, Saunders stayed with Knight and the couple had a daughter. However, shortly after the birth, Saunders left for good after Knight tried to stab him in the chest with a pair of scissors. Knight then went on to have a 3-year relationship with a man named John Chillingworth, with whom she had a son. Whilst there was no record of violence within this relationship, Chillingworth eventually left Knight after discovering her affair with a man named John Charles Thomas Price. John Price made good money as a miner, and seeing this as an opportunity to be a kept woman, in 1995, Knight moved in with Price and his 2 children. At first things were good and the blended family seemed to be getting on well. However, that all changed when Price turned down Knight's proposal of marriage. In retaliation for the knockback, Knight framed Price and had him fired from his job, for which Price then kicked Knight out of his house. Eventually the pair got back together, but Price refused to let Knight move back into the house. Once again, Knight turned to violence, and in February of 2000, she attempted to stab Price in the chest. Price then took out a restraining order against Catherine Knight to protect himself and his children, and he told co-workers that if he ever went missing, if anything ever happened to him, that Catherine Knight had killed him. But at some point, John Price decided to let Catherine Knight back into his home and back into his life. A decision that would prove fatal, because on February 29, 2000, John Price arrived home from work, went about his routine, and went to bed at 11 p.m. Knight then arrived home shortly after. She ate, watched some TV, had a shower, had sex with John Price, and then stabbed him 37 times with her butcher's knives that she kept by the side of her bed. She then dragged his dead body downstairs, hung him on a meat hook in the living room where she skinned him, decapitated him, and cut off large chunks of flesh. She then cooked these large chunks of flesh alongside potatoes and veg, took a large amount of pills, and fell asleep. The next morning, after Price's co-workers had raised the alarm, police arrived at the house where they discovered a gruesome scene. John Price's head was boiling in a pot, and on a table were 2 full plates of vegetables and cooked human flesh, with the plates labelled for John's children, whom Catherine Knight had hoped to feed the body to. Despite the mountain of evidence against her, Catherine Knight maintains her innocence as she serves out a life sentence. The next Black Widow on our list is a woman named Mary Elizabeth Wilson, who between 1955 and 1957 married and buried 4 husbands. Wilson, born in 1893 in the UK's South Tyneside, married her first husband, John Knowles, in 1912, and they moved into a house in Windy Nook, Gateshead. At some point, Wilson's lover, John Russell, also moved in with the couple. This became a permanent arrangement and only changed in 1955 when, after 43 years of marriage, John Knowles passed away. It was only 5 months later that Mary Elizabeth Wilson went on to marry her lover, John Russell. However, in late 1956, Russell also passed away. Both deaths were declared to be of natural causes, leaving Wilson with an inheritance of £42. Already 2 husbands down, Wilson, now 64, married her third husband in 1957, a retired estate agent called Oliver Leonard. However, just 12 days after they married, 75-year-old Leonard was taken ill and passed away of heart failure. Mary Elizabeth Wilson, who by this point had been given the nickname the Merry Widow of Windy Nook, then went on to marry her 4th husband, Ernest Wilson. Ernest was dead within the year, leaving his wife with £100, a bungalow, and a fully paid up life insurance policy. Of course, Wilson's situation became the talk of the town, not only for the frequency in which her husbands were dropping dead, but because of her dark humour about the subject. For example, she joked to the local undertaker that she should get a discount due to the amount of trade she was giving him. And at her 4th wedding reception, when asked what to do with the leftover food, she said, "Keep it, it will stay fresh enough for the funeral." A funeral which, it must be noted, she didn't even bother to attend. After suspicions rose, the bodies of Oliver Leonard and Ernest Wilson were exhumed, and a pathologist discovered evidence of phosphorus poisoning. The same evidence was also found, after her conviction, to be the cause of death of both her first and second husband as well. During her trial, the defence of Mary Elizabeth Wilson tried to claim that the phosphorus found in the bodies were from sexual stimulation pills. However, the jury did not believe this, and Mary Elizabeth Wilson was sentenced to death on March 29, 1958. However, she was granted clemency and was instead sent to Holloway Prison, where she died at the age of 70 on December 5th, 1962. The final Black Widow on our list is a woman named Betty Lou Beats. Born in North Carolina on March 12, 1937, Beats had a rough upbringing. She suffered abuse and at the age of 12 was left to bring up her siblings after her mother was institutionalized. In 1952, at the age of 15, Beats married a man named Franklin Robert Branson, with whom she had 6 children. However, the relationship was abusive and it ended for good in 1969. In 1970, at the age of 33, Beats went on to enter into another marriage, this time with a man by the name of Billy York Lane. However, as is the running theme here, the relationship was full of abuse, jealousy and violence, with one fight seeing Lane breaking Betty Lou Beats' nose, to which she responded by shooting him twice in the back. Lane survived the attack, and attempted murder charges were dropped after Lane admitted to police that he threatened his wife's life first. The couple divorced in 1972. Then, between 1973 and 1978, Beats dated and eventually married a man named Ronnie Threcold. Threcold was a heavy drinker and the couple often clashed, with the marriage eventually ending after Beats tried to run Threcold over with her car. In 1979, Beats took her 4th husband, a man named Doyle Wayne Baker, but by 1982 she had moved on to her 5th husband, a man named Jimmy Don Beats. This marriage was short-lived because in 1983, after being reported missing, police found the retired Dallas firefighter's boat floating on a lake, and it was concluded that the man had drowned. However, 2 years later, things changed, because one of Betty Lou Beats' sons came forward to police and admitted that Jimmy Don Beats had been murdered and that he had helped his mother to bury the body. Police then raided the house, where they discovered the remains of Jimmy Don Beats stuffed in a sleeping bag, buried under a plastic wishing well. But that wasn't the only body they discovered, because they also found the body of Beats' fourth husband, Doyle Wayne Baker, who had been buried under a shed. Both men had been shot multiple times in the back of the head with the same pistol. Beats claimed to her trial that she was completely innocent and that it had been her 2 children, who had testified against her, that had committed the murders. Whilst her children had been involved in the disposal of the bodies, it was Betty Lou Beats that was sentenced for murder. During her time trying to fight against her death sentence, Betty Lou Beats said in 1999, "Whilst the Texas law enforcement out there did nothing to help me, it is now legal for them to finish the job." Betty Lou Beats was then executed by lethal injection on the 24th of February 2000 at the age of 62.